After weeks of speculation, the Saints have found their defensive coordinator. Brandon Staley is going to lead that side of the ball. Let's talk about the hire right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Who Dat Nation? Welcome inside another edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I'm your host, Chris Rosevoglu, and as always, the Straight Up Saints podcast is brought to you by Scott Fickner, injury lawyers who've been injured in any kind of accident, car, truck, 18-wheeler, or hurt offshore. Scott Fickner handles it all. You give a call at 504-500-1111 for a free consultation. They'll always fight for the win. So for the last couple of weeks, I would say, when the Saints were linked to Kellen Moore, everyone was wondering who would be his defensive coordinator. And every single time it was mentioned, one of the names that kept coming up, Brandon Staley, former Chargers head coach, and for good reason, right? Brandon Staley, for all the negatives that there's been with the Chargers, is still considered a hot commodity when it comes to being a defensive play caller. Had that one really, really good season with the Rams, which I'll get into in just a minute. And the one thing that you can't deny, there is a working connection there with Kellen Moore and Brandon Staley. When Brandon Staley was the head coach of the Chargers during the 2023 season, which was his last year with LA, Kellen Moore was his offensive coordinator. So now, oddly enough, Kellen Moore's the head coach, gets to take a crack at that job this time, and Brandon Staley is the play caller, albeit defensive, not offensive. So what are my thoughts on the hire? Because I'm sure a lot of people are going to have different mixed reactions to this. Some people might think that this is a steal. Don't know if I'd go that far. And some people might act like this is the worst thing in the world. I also wouldn't go that far. So I know that when it comes to being reactionary, I usually stand pretty firm on a side until proven either right or wrong, whatever it may be. I think when it comes to the Brandon Staley thing, I'm gonna practice being patient here for one reason. When it comes to Brandon Staley's defense with the Chargers, I didn't find them good at all. All the statistics will tell you it was at best, maybe at best, like 20th best unit, usually in the low 20s. His defense stunk with the Chargers. And I'm always a big believer in a coach has to at least have their side of the ball humming. If they can't do that, you're probably not worth a damn as a head coach. But that is as a head coach. And for Brandon Staley, that one season as the Rams defensive coordinator, just one season, and they were loaded with talent, but they were the number one ranked scoring defense in the NFL that year. And I don't think that's something that I could just discredit from him. My question for Brandon Staley is going to be this. Is he closer to being one of those really good defensive coordinators, bad head coach, or is the Rams season in 2020 where he became a hot commodity and everyone wanted him, was that just an anomaly? Was that just a random ass, really good year where, having guys like Aaron Donald, who are generational talent, uplift the play caller? That's my question with Brandon Staley. Because if he was lifted by the talent, then he's probably going to end up being a rough hire for the Saints because right now the defense isn't loaded. But if he's one of those really good play callers, just can't be a head coach, who knows? This might be a really good hire for Kellen Moore. That's the balance that you're trying to juggle here. And that's what I'm trying to figure out as a Saints fan, just to try to be fair with this. Because I think the easy thing right now today is to get annoyed by this hire. Because I'm going to be honest, Brandon Staley did some shit in LA that pissed me off. He always acted like he was the smartest guy in the room. And for better or worse, the results weren't there. And the two things that I will always remember Brandon Staley for, blowing a 27-0 lead in a playoff game. I don't know how, as a defensive head coach, if you get a 27-point lead for your defense, how do you blow that? And then the second thing, the year before that, Chargers had a chance to go into the playoffs. Seemed like the Raiders and Chargers were kind of slow playing towards a tie. And this man makes a couple of judgment calls when it comes to using his timeouts that end up biting the Chargers in the ass, and they miss the playoffs on the final game of the season in overtime. So, look, those things stick with me. But he also is not going to be in charge of all those things as a defensive coordinator as opposed to head coach. So, I would say for anyone that's discouraged by this hire, I'll tell you this. If this doesn't go well and Brandon Staley's not the dude, Kellen Moore is going to have an opportunity to pivot in the offseason. Because I said this when they hired Doug Nussmeier as the offensive coordinator earlier this week. Kellen Moore's the last coach that was hired. The options that you have aren't great. Now, Kellen Moore is fortunate enough that guys that he knows pretty well were there for the taking, so he could bring in Nussmeier. He can bring in Brandon Staley. You can have some familiarity and cohesion within the coaching staff. But if these guys don't work, then next offseason, there's going to be a plethora of options that open up, and you can go attack. Just look at what happened this offseason, right? Dennis Allen was an available DC. Robert Saleh was available. Lou Anarumo was available. Jeff Ulbrich was available. Like, those are premier defensive coordinator names. Matt Eberflus, another one. Premier names that become available. So if this doesn't work out, Kellen can always reassess next offseason, get a new play caller. But who knows? Maybe just maybe, Brandon Staley is one of those pretty good play callers, just not a good head coach. And if that's the case, the Saints may have struck gold here with Brandon Staley. But we'll wait and see how it all plays out. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Do you like this hire for New Orleans? Are you on the camp of, man, I don't like anything Brandon Staley? Either way, totally understand where you guys are on this one, but let me know in the comment section below. And as always, guys, stay tuned for more content here from Boot Crew Media and the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for the Who Dat Nation.